Do you think she's still looking for us?
She never stopped. She never will.
The battlefield reeked of ash and ancient blood. The war between the Celestian Empire and the Vrakan Horde had stretched across 7 star systems for 3 brutal years. Entire moons had cracked. Civilizations had turned to dust. And on the scorched plains of planet Illyris, where twin suns burned low on the horizon, the final battle had taken place, a battle no one was meant to survive. Empress Seraphira stood at the edge of her obsidian throne room, her silver-white hair cascading over her luminous blue shoulders, her eyes glowing faintly with the pale fire that marked her royal bloodline. She had not slept in 43 days. She had not wept in 44. Weeping, she told herself, was for those who still had something to mourn. She had nothing left. Her twin daughters, Lyrian and Solara, had been sent to the front lines as ambassadors of peace, carrying the sacred starstone that could end the war. They had never returned. The Vrakan had confirmed their defeat. Scouts had searched the ruins of Illyris for weeks, finding only silence and bone. Seraphira had buried 2 empty caskets beneath the silver tree and declared them fallen. She had ordered the stars themselves to dim in mourning, and yet something in her chest refused to go dark. His name was Kalin Marsh. He was not a general, not a nobleman, not a decorated commander. He was a human, one of the few mercenary soldiers who had fought under the Celestian banner not for glory, but for coin and a stubborn sense of justice that he could never quite explain. He had brown eyes and black hair cut short above his ears, a face carved by years of war, and a jaw that still clenched when he thought about the things he'd seen. He wore battered gray armor that had been repaired so many times it barely remembered its original shape. He had survived Illyris by falling into a trench and letting the ceiling of the world collapse above him. When he woke, he was buried under 3 meters of rubble, surrounded by darkness, smoke, and the faint sound of breathing. 2 voices. Very soft. Very young. He dug for 6 hours with his bare hands. His gauntlets had been lost somewhere in the collapse. By the time he reached them, his fingers were bleeding and his shoulders screamed with every movement. But when the dust cleared and he found 2 girls, their blue skin pale with cold, their ears gently pointed, their silver hair matted with dried blood, he did not stop to calculate the risk. He gathered both of them in his arms and carried them out of the ruins one at a time. They were unconscious for 2 days. He fed them from his ration pack, shared his one thin blanket, and built a small fire from the broken spears of fallen soldiers. He had no idea who they were. They looked fragile. They looked like someone's daughters. On the 3rd day, Lyrian opened her violet eyes and whispered, "You should not have come back for us. We are not worth the cost." Kalin looked at her with the flat expression of a man who had heard too many people undervalue themselves. "Seems like that's my call to make," he said. "Not yours." Solara woke an hour later, her blue-tinted lips trembling, her fingers clutching the tattered remains of a jewel at her neck, the starstone, still intact, still glowing faintly beneath the grime. She looked at the human soldier with enormous, haunted eyes. "The war," she breathed. "Did we lose?" "Not yet," he said. "Not while you're still breathing." It took 11 days to cross the shattered continent of Illyris on foot. Kalin carried Solara on his back for the first 4, until her strength returned. He taught them how to read the wind for enemy patrols, how to sleep light, how to find water in the cracked stone of dead rivers. They taught him, in return, how the Starstone worked, how it could seal the war treaty if brought to the Celestian Council, how it had been the whole point of their mission, how they had nearly died protecting it. He listened carefully. He did not ask for thanks. When they finally reached the Celestian border outpost, exhausted and barely clothed, the soldiers on duty went pale at the sight of them. One dropped to his knees. Another reached for his communicator with shaking hands. "The princesses," someone whispered. "The lost princesses are alive." Seraphira received the transmission at the dead of night. She stood very still for a long time after, the holographic image burning before her, her daughters, thin and wind-bitten but unmistakably alive, sitting beside a human soldier who looked like he hadn't slept properly in weeks. When the image cut out, she placed one hand flat against her chest, where something ancient and half-frozen cracked open like ice in spring. She was at the border outpost within 3 hours. When she stepped through the door and saw Lyrian and Solara run toward her across the room, she did not maintain the cold posture of an empress. She held them the way she had not held anyone in years, tightly, desperately, as though she was afraid they were still a dream. She pressed her face into their hair and said nothing. There were no words in any language grand enough for that moment. Eventually, she looked up. Kalin was standing at the far side of the room, his back against the wall, arms crossed loosely, giving them space. He met her gaze without flinching, not out of arrogance, but simply because he was the kind of man who did not look away from things that mattered. Seraphira crossed the room slowly. She was an empress. She was a foot taller than him. She was ancient and luminous and composed in the way that only deep grief could make a person. She stopped in front of him and studied his face. The blood still dried at his temple, the exhaustion in his eyes, the quiet dignity of a man who had done something enormous and expected nothing. "You carried my daughters out of the end of the world," she said. "They weren't heavy," he replied. Her daughters laughed from across the room, the first real laughter the Empress had heard in over a year. The sound hit her somewhere deep, somewhere she had sealed off. She looked at this tired, stubborn, ordinary human man and felt something shift inside her that she could not name and would not dare to name yet. But she inclined her head, an empress bowing to no title, only to a truth. "I am in your debt," she said quietly. Kalin shook his head slowly. "You don't owe me anything." He glanced past her at her daughters. "But they're going to need some rest. Real rest. A warm bed and something better than field rations." Seraphira almost smiled.